People's Bank was bought by M&T Bank, and I observed a insecure practice, in my opinion, that they were doing on their website, and I put them on blast on social.
Saw that
last week, and one of their engineers DM'd me, direct messaged me, and he was like, his first approach was like, "Hey man, what are you selling? Is this a pitch? Are you trying to sell us?" Or are you like pointing out something that is this a support issue? I'm like, I'm not selling anything you guys are buying, first of all.
Yep.
But, and I said, I'm just a good faith contributor, stakeholder here that's pointing out that you guys are inducing insecure behavior of your customers. And then he engaged me in the philosophical debate.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, listen, the reason why I put you guys on blast is because I don't believe that you are operating even within the threshold of the philosophical debate. I believe you guys are outside of that threshold. And after the conversation, he eventually relented, and he thanked me for my time and contribution.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, yeah, I see. He kind of gave me one of these things like, I actually agree with you. But he had so how do we approach the businesses? We fit in to where they are. We meet them where they are.
Yep.
And then we follow this methodology that we've developed internally, where if we see something, we say something, and we advise and we support. We advise and we support. We advise and we support.
So welcome to another episode of the First Byte podcast, your guide to topics in IT, web design, and marketing. I'm Nathan Cheatham. I'm here with Eric Beerendorf.
How's it going?
Today we are talking about successful IT management for your middle to large company.
Okay, that's a little more exciting. The first version of this title before you hit the record button was a little eye-watering. Okay, so who are the stakeholders? Rhetorically, that's the CEO, CFO. We're often hired by CFOs.
Okay.
So oftentimes you see the CEO tell the person who manages the money to hire the vendors.
Yeah.
Right? So we have a lot of CFOs that we work with, and they have varying degrees of technology prowess. We do work with CIOs and CTOs, so the Chief Information Officer. So the CFO's Chief Financial Officer, the CIO's Chief Information Officer, CTOs, Chief Technology Officers. So you get the idea, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we're hired by an IT manager. So the business imperative for most businesses, if not all of them, are managing the business successfully, and that's a really broad term. So that means managing your resources, managing your costs, your expenses. Now there's this IT layer, which IT's been around for 30 years or more. I mean, spreadsheeting has been around since the 80s. So numbers are computers have been in the business environment for my entire life. I think for a lot of years it wasn't viewed as a competitive imperative.
Okay.
It was more viewed as like stationary. I had a client once, a large client. It was actually the staff that reported this experience to me. But apparently the CEO gave a stationary budget to the staff. Mm-hmm. How many pencils they could use or pens they could draw from the stationery closet.
Okay.
And I mean, I don't want to insult anybody on that methodology of leadership, but I certainly don't limit the amount of pens and pencils and Post-it notes that the staff can use in our company.
Mm-hmm.
Like those are empowering tools, not expense items or something. So IT, I think, and still you see it to this day, has been historically viewed as something akin to stationary or unavoidable expense that CEOs and business managers have been using begrudgingly or what have you, Then enter cybersecurity and the whole cybersecurity imperative. And now you start seeing, really businesses that are thought leaders in their space, they're actually realizing that IT is a competitive advantage.
Mm-hmm.
It's more than just a business imperative, but it's really, the tool that IT manages the primary work tools that the businesses use today.
So let's dig into this a little bit.
That was a lot of foundation.
Yeah,
I spend a lot of time on that, but it's important.
Yeah, right. So what happens when IT is failing?
Well, that's my point. So if you view IT as pens and pencils and stationery, you're not viewing it as if it is a failure point. So if you're not viewing it as a competitive advantage, something to leverage, something that's going to induce a business to compete better, to eliminate costs and reduce costs, then it's going to be mismanaged.
Mm-hmm.
A mismanaged IT environment can really be problematic. I laid a lot of foundation to what IT is, and maybe that's trite, maybe that didn't need to be said, but if you don't view the IT as a competitive advantage or a business imperative, then it's just going to be mismanaged. So you really do need to view IT as the tools you need to keep sharp in order to keep the business sharp.
Mm-hmm.
So you need the continued investment and engagement with leadership and all the key stakeholders, including the end users. IT needs to continually shadow end users to make sure that the workflows are being improved, which is not something that I see often enough. COOs and CIOs, they're not actually shadowing end users in mundane, necessarily mundane tasks.
Yeah.
To see, is somebody printing a document to carry over to another office or another department, or are there webcams on every computer so that people can have inter-office communication through video? Still today, and maybe it's early and we're just because we're kind of on the front of this, we think that every computer should have now a webcam, and every business resource should be kind of webcam ready during the time that they're conducting business. I mean, if you go back to the standard work environment, people are walking into each other's offices all the time, and they're fully clothed and camera. Well, like there was jokes during the COVID era where like people were like wearing like PJs below the desk and then the suit and tie above the desk. So it's always funny to me that people will go to an office and be prepared to work with their colleagues, but they're immediately camera shy. So I get that there's this psychological thing there to it, but
I think so. And this is me being like a Mac user, and when I go and think about webcams, and especially like Windows, where not always is the webcam like internal for business computers, so you have to go and get
desktops definitely,
external, Logitech or whatever. And in the past, like I've just had issues with the quality. I buy something that says 1080p, but like I plug it in the plug and play, I plug it in and it just, the quality isn't there and I get frustrated. And so like I think that is a learning curve and something where the technology is just kind of catching up to where we're at now with post-COVID work from home and all of that stuff, because it wasn't as imperative. Like webcams in 2015 were like, I don't know, I'm gonna interface with my grandma, or like there's definitely been a shift in the business world.
There's been a shift, but at the same time, like I don't want to not invalidate you by saying, a 420p webcam on every computer in like an enterprise is better than none.
True. Yeah.
Well,
I think there's just sometimes a hang up of like some of the technology, and which is kind of where it gets into with having the right IT provider to help you with that. And I kind of see it breaking down into three different aspects that your whatever IT, whether it's on-premise only, on-premise with an external, or just fully outsourced, IT comes down to the data that you're housing, the equipment and software, and then your security. So those three buckets are kind of where you have to make sure they're all being handled effectively, like
properly, securely, right,
and 24/7. If you let that go any of those buckets, like your security, your data, your equipment, something's going to break, someone's going to breach, and you're going to have a problem.
There's so many slices to that pie.
Yep.
There's the work tools. Are the tools properly maintained and managed, like servers and passwords and policies and cybersecurity related items like that? Then there's tools like webcams and things like that. And then there's workflows and processes. So we kind of covered all of that. And it does kind of cover it. It is this kind of big pie. And, it's self-serving to say that, if it's not managed properly, then there's a problem.
Yeah. And it's a lot of work for anyone that, if you're at a C level, like a CTO, CIO, or if you're the CFO, like I can't imagine going to someone that's managing the books, managing the financials, and saying like, "Hey, you need to make sure that a hacker doesn't breach in and take access to your money or to your data."
Right.
That's a lot to ask.
Yeah, I mean, you're a CFO and you're charged by the CEO to manage vendors, and so the CFO shops the CFO works with HR to hire maybe a technology manager or IT manager, something like that. The IT managers, underwater or trying to hide deficiencies in their effort, maybe because they don't know how to ask for more resources or because they're maybe not capable. So there's a lot of problems there. So, it's important to know kind of what the limitations are and how to best leverage the resources. That's usually when we get involved.
Yep.
We have, our clients are so wonderful. They know that we're not there to make anybody look bad or replace anybody. We're there to augment and supplement existing teams and processes. And the benefit to working with us, and this is completely self-serving, I realize, but we can be the bricks, we can be the mortar, we can be the bricks and the mortar. If your in-house resources are the bricks, we're the mortar, so we're filling in the cracks. Or we can be the bricks and your resources can be the mortar. So we've worked in all of those scenarios with large organizations, 100 plus employees. So and we have small clients as well. So we fit in with all organizations depending on what their needs are.
Yeah. So talking to the CFO, the CEO, how do you go about evaluating your current IT infrastructure, your IT, like to find out if you have gaps, if that IT manager is functionally managing everything, or if there's some areas where it's not working out and you need to bring someone in? Like, let's say a larger size company talks to us and says like, "Hey, look at our department and see what needs to be fixed." Like, what would you go about doing? How would you evaluate that?
Well, so larger corporations already have pre-existing cultures and strategies and cultures and strategies. So when we get called in, we first just listen to what their primary objectives are. Is it they've identified a security hole in their data center or some functionality of their IT function, and we close that first. So so that's the first thing that we do. If a client calls and says, "Can you just do a full audit and give us a report of everything that's going on?" I mean, we can do that. There's a lot of different standards like ITIL and NIST and various bodies that have codified what IT should be and how it should be run. And you could generate a lot of reports on a lot of things, and you can get really granular. And how granular do you get? And an organization should always be working towards codifying their environment and being present of mind of their environment and working towards current standards and technologies while meeting the needs of the business. So when we how do we get started with a client? It always is informed by what the client calls us for.
Yeah.
And then we we've been doing this a long time, so we can usually, we know there's only a finite amount of dispositions a client is in when they call us. Something bad just happened.
Right.
Or somebody just got an ultimatum to fix something, or they just like had an aha moment or something, right? So we don't come in and shake the snow globe, and we don't disrupt anything because it's not really necessary. IT is, I don't want to say it's wishy-washy, but it's just like, it's this thing that is never done.
Mm-hmm.
It's never done perfectly, because you show me two IT guys and I'll show you two different opinions on how to configure a password policy.
Gotcha.
Okay. People's Bank was bought by M&T Bank, and I observed a insecure practice, in my opinion, that they were doing on their website, and I put them on blast on social.
Saw that
last week, and one of their engineers DM'd me, direct messaged me, and he was like, his first approach was like, "Hey man, what are you selling? Is this a pitch? Are you trying to sell us? Or are you like pointing out something that is this a support issue?" I'm like, "I'm not selling anything you guys are buying, first of all."
Yep.
But, and I said, "I'm just a good faith contributor, stakeholder here that's pointing out that you guys are inducing insecure behavior of your customers." And then he engaged me in the philosophical debate.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, "Listen, the reason why I put you guys on blast is because I don't believe that you are operating even within the threshold of the philosophical debate. I believe you guys are outside of that threshold." And after the conversation, he eventually relented, and he thanked me for my time and contribution.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, "Yeah, I see." He kind of gave me one of these things like, I actually agree with you." But he had, so how do we approach the businesses? We fit in to where they are. We meet them where they are.
Yep.
And then we follow this methodology that we've developed internally, where if we see something, we say something, and we advise and we support. We advise and we support. We advise and we support. And if we have clients that have their hands firmly on the wheel, then we're in the passenger seat, and as the landscape is going by, we point out what we see, and we support.
Mm-hmm.
But what we usually find is, as we get more, once the relationship evolves and develops with our clients, they loosen the grip on the steering wheel.
Yeah.
Because we built the trust establishes really quickly when we show them maybe what they've been missing.
Mm-hmm.
When we back it up with data, best practices, and methodology, they start feeling more and more comfortable. They start feeling more and more secure, and we start kind of working hand in glove with righting the ship, hardening their attack surfaces, and improving their end users' experience and daily lives, so to speak.
Gotcha. Yeah. So they communicate with us. We get involved with a company, and then we can kind of help support and make sure that they don't have blind spots. We're there to show them.
Yeah, it would be unfair for me to say that I know everything.
Yeah.
But I also have a team of people that I built that I trust, and our clients bring us in because we are an extension of the team that they're building, that they trust.
Right.
So
I think this leads very well into, how much does this all cost? Like, is this like, you think of a whole division to your company, and you think of all the overhead and costs for employees, and when someone comes to us, and do we we have transparent pricing. Like, they can go right to our website and see our costs.
Yes, one thing that we view as a competitive advantage in the way that we run our business is we put our pricing right on our website. It's the pricing page is kind of always a work in progress. As we have feedback and experiences with our new and prospective clients, we make adjustments to be more transparent. And right now we have dollar amounts on our website for services and engagement plans with us to help support every business out there.
Yeah.
So I don't want to be I don't want to be specific on recording because things will change.
Right.
But if you go to evernetco.com/pricing, there are dollar amounts right on our website that align with exact services that a client could engage us for to meet their needs.
Yeah. So now, would you say that like the cost benefit and the pricing for an outsourced IT, how does that compare to just having your own internal IT people?
I mean, the conversation to the benefits of outsourcing and the advantages and disadvantages to outsourcing, those are pretty well established arguments and points, and that's kind of done science, so to speak. A company has to decide what kind of company that they want to be, what kind of culture that they want to run. Do you have an accountant on staff? Do you have an attorney on staff? Or do you hire a law firm when you need legal representation? Do you hire a CPA firm when you want your books run? Many times companies kind of find this middle, model where they've got a bookkeeper or accounting manager and maybe not a CPA, but although certainly larger firms, yes, they start hiring CPAs, larger companies start hiring in-house legal counsel. So yes, you start forming the IT function within the company as well. But outside contractors, outside partners like us, like external law firms, external CPA firms, they're, it's commonplace. It's a mainstay. So if your mid-sized enterprise business is not leveraging the benefits of an IT outsourced vendor like Evernet, I think you're leaving a lot on, again, self-serving for me to say that, but you're leaving a lot on the table. You're certainly not leveraging the benefit of more eyes and ears protecting the business, and the obvious benefits of contracting is you don't have the HR complications to hiring subcontractors and a contractor and a vendor like that. So it's easy to have a vendor come in, establish a relationship, see what value it brings to the organization, continue to leverage that resource, or modulate that engagement to the benefit of the company and the culture and that sort of thing.
So bringing in Evernet or any IT provider,
right?
Realistically, I would say it kind of customizes to your needs, right? So do you just work through as far as as you're growing, you're scaling, you're downsizing, how does that interaction work? Because if you're talking internal and you're downsizing, that's people's jobs,
right?
So,
well, that's one of the advantages of hiring a vendor is the vendor's work product for the business is commensurate with the size and need of the business. So whereas when you're staffing everything in-house, when you lose a full-time body in a company, it leaves a big hole in it. Think of rocks and sand in a jar. You know what I mean? Employees are the rocks, the contractors are the sand. These videos are not. I don't want them to be Evernet advertisements. I want to empower our viewers and our clients and our prospective clients with whatever we're saying here about Evernet. You can pick any IT company. We're just. I think that we're the best, and we're. I think that we built a world-class product and team, but the messaging is the same. If you're not leveraging an IT vendor in some way to support your enterprise, then you have blind spots for sure. You just don't have as many people looking at the business unit, the business units.
Yeah. Well, I think we've gone through IT. We've gone through connecting with an outside vendor. Some terminology that kind of comes up when you're researching this, looking through, managed service provider. We use this a lot. And for us in the business, we understand what it is. But for someone that's looking to bring in an outside IT vendor, what is managed services? What does the provider aspect mean? And does that differ from just any sort of normal or like hourly
Yeah.
IT?
So the two managed service provider has come up big over the last 20 years. And what it really means is the idea came with a managed service provider. The model came up with the idea that we already know. Remember earlier in the show that we were talking about, like, IT at first was a calculator introduced into an accounting firm, which that was previously using a slide rule. I mean, circa maybe pre-70s or something, right?
Sure.
And then you had the first like endpoint PC that was doing spreadsheeting and simple calculations. So IT kind of like developed over time, you know. So when IT was first born, it was the idea was just kind of like keeping the computers running,
Yeah.
you know, and it was more reactive. It was like the company bought these tools, they broke, and somebody fixed them or replaced them. Then in the 2000s, it was realized that IT was in fact an expectable business imperative. It was an expectable business paradigm that you were going to run your business on these tools, data centers, softwares, that sort of thing. So and then we did develop enough data that we could actually see what the reasonable anticipated overhead and costs were going to be to run the IT function of a business. And you can kind of boil that down to a per computer or per user. It was first, the managed services model was first derived using a per device calculus. How many computers do you have in the organization?
Yep.
And then we can kind of derive a reasonable expected value of what it would cost to manage and maintain that environment. Then when smartphones came out in 2000, the iPhone came out in 2007, it became a mainstay in the IT world in 2010, I would say, or soon after 2007. And then this concept of BYOD, bring your own device, started coming, where employees were starting to bring their own smartphones, their own iPhones to the office, maybe their own laptops or their home computers, and they work from home now, remote work, all that stuff. So then the managed services model has shifted from a per user or per device model to now it's a per user. So it's like, okay, well, let's say you're a small bank or a local bank with one or two branches. You've got 50 employees. They all might have two or more devices. So you know that you can build a reasonable cost structure and management structure around your IT function based on the amount of employees you have and in that model. So the managed services provider, MSP, which is what we are, says, okay, well, we know reasonably what it's going to cost to properly maintain your IT, and kind of evolve it as new products and services and solutions are born and enter, and that sort of thing. So the managed service provider says you can outsource the entire IT function to MSP, a managed services provider. And so long as the fee is agreeable to the company, you can kind of know that the entire IT function is handled. I mean, basically.
Gotcha. So the service aspect of that is, as the provider, we're putting the software on the devices. We're handling,
everything.
Tech support calls,
help desk, tech support, end user support, software migration, software installation, software integrations, software planning, big picture planning. Part of the managed services model is you get a VCIO, virtual chief information officer, with that. So the VCIO at the MSP, i.e. me, there's a lot of letters, meets with leadership, CEOs, CFOs, IT managers to talk about what the business is doing on a quarterly or some regular basis. Are we growing? Are we contracting? What should IT come to expect? How is the IT unit performing for the business and the stakeholders? So it is a IT department as a service.
Gotcha.
Basically. And it does imply that it's managed.
Yep.
So we don't need the business to instigate an inquiry in order for something to be protected or for something to be fixed. So we proactively monitor and manage the entire business IT footprint, all of the computers, the servers, the endpoints, the mobile devices, software. We monitor and manage all of that. And when something needs to be done, we take action on it, kind of unilaterally. Of course, we of course work with all the local stakeholders that may be impacted for if it's a software update or something like that. But the managed the managed term implies that we have unilateral management authority of the footprint of the IT. Conversely, and the predecessor to the managed services model was the ITSP, IT service provider model, where the management came from inside the company. The CEO, the CFO was applying their own thinking to the management of the IT unit, business unit, and then they would call us when they got a notice of warranty expiring on a Dell server, or they got a notice from the software vendor that there was a new update that needed to be installed, or a new migration that needed to be installed, or a new integration between accounting and business operations or something. And so the ITSP model, which is still very much alive, and we still have contracts and engagements like that, which is fine. It just means that you're managing it.
It's kind of like when it breaks, you call us to fix it.
Yeah, I mean, the frequently used term is reactive versus proactive, which, like when you use a term long enough, you're like tired of using it. So I kind of like stray away from using it, but that's what it means. It means you're managing it. We can help you continue to manage it in that context.
Yeah.
But it's induced by you, not us as the vendor, right? If we're an ITSP, you have a support contract with us, we're ready to respond to your needs when you have them. Whereas the managed services model means that we are monitoring, we are managing, we are responsible, right, for your IT function, and we get to make certain managerial decisions and inputs.
Yeah, so it's kind of like if you're that C-level executive that's thinking about like how to manage all this. Do you want the headache or do you not?
Right. And again, there's the hybrid too. So we can be a managed services provider, and I think some of our competitors may debate me on this, but our methodology is we believe we can still be a managed service provider and co-manage, and this is the term. This is a lot of the content we're starting to put out now. We're starting to use the word co-managed. I believe we can be a managed service provider and co-manage the environment with internal resources at the enterprise. So if you have a CFO or CIO or CTO or IT services manager or something, we will work in a passive hand in glove relationship with that resource. We will say, of course, the contract dilutes liability and responsibility, right? So if we say like this is what should happen, or this is what we think should happen in a given scenario, and we're in a co-managed environment, and the business full-time employee charged with co-working with us and co-managing with us overrides and says we're not going to do that. We document everything kind of in our ticketing system. So that just goes in and says, okay, we recommend migrating from this antivirus to this endpoint EDR, because we're migrating that or whatever. And the co-managed point of contact says, well, I think we're not going to allocate the budget for that project and migration or something. We say, okay, well, we think that puts the business at a disadvantage from a cybersecurity standpoint, but we will help you maintain it in its present environment based on the decision you made.
Yeah. We come in as part of the team.
Exactly.
We play well with others.
Exactly.
Essentially, yep.
Yeah.
So if you are, interested in looking for an outsourced IT supplier, add someone to your team, you can contact and talk directly with Eric by going to evernetco.com and clicking schedule a discovery call. And I would say, having a conversation with you just to explore the concepts, whether or not you're going to, directly engage with us in the end.
I give everybody an hour of my time for free.
Yeah.
I'm happy to do that. I love meeting new people. I love making new relationships and learning just from that kind of new relationship standpoint. So if there's any thought given to our, should you outsource any or all? Are we the right vendor for you or not?
Mm-hmm.
We're not a hard sale organization, so we are only here for the clients who are excited about how we can protect them, how we can support them. So yeah, if you are even remotely interested in a conversation, go to the website. I think there's really only 2 calls to action on our website, and every page should have a link for a discovery call, and that is with me, an hour of my time. We don't have to talk for the whole hour. But that's a discovery call where we just talk. I just listen to what you're thinking, what you're suffering from, what ails you, what have you. The other action, I think we have a generic mail. It's not a newsletter yet, I think, but if there's an input for your email and you want some information, I would suggest you follow us on social or give us your email address, because we're starting to put out. I think we're getting a lot of good feedback. We do get some unsubs, but we're getting a lot of good feedback that the email information that we're putting out is really helpful and educational.
Yeah, and even the blogs that are on the website, if you
blog, yeah,
and click into the blogs, there's we're building a library of resources
right.
that can really help you. But thanks again for watching. Like and subscribe. Find us on all socials at EvernetCO. So Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn.
I think we're on the TikTok.
We're on the TikTok. YouTube as well. Obviously, you're watching
YouTube, yeah.
Here. And visit our website, evernetco.com.
Thanks, Nate.